Hello friends, I am Simon and this is my in-depth review of the Fox Orange 80, also known as the Pizza80. This keyboard here was made by Center of Fox Labs, better known as just Center, and this was his first ever publicly available keyboard. This was sold in 2017, in summer of 2017, and since then he's moved on to do a 75% variant, as well as a numpad. And then more notably, the Leaf 80 and Leaf 60 in both aluminum and polycarbonate. You probably know about those. But like I said, this was available in 2017, and as a result, it's got 2017 prices. This in full aluminum, so 6063 aluminum with an aluminum plate and a aluminum weight, was a grand total of $280 US. And it came with a lovely little carrying case, which we'll discuss later. I really like the design of this keyboard. I like that it's very unique and isn't the more general rectangle that you buy these days. So let's pop right into it. We'll look at the external case first. And here we are. First things first, the entire case is made out of 6063 aluminum, and there was a variant available in 7075 with a micro arc oxidation coating, also known as MAO, which is a creamy beige grayish white. I went with the anodization though. I went with it because it was cheaper at the time, and I didn't want to mess around with MAO until a lot later when the technology was handled a little bit better. Now, what makes this unique is two things when you look at it. The first thing is what a lot of people refer to as Chinese blockers, but this is essentially a wing key wing keyless. So it has blockers, but still has the wing keys. What it does is it removes the menu key that is generally available here on the right, and instead replaces it with two blockers that add up to the size of one of these keys right here. A second thing you'll notice is it looks kind of flat, and it is, indeed. It is very flat. It has an angle of 0 degrees. This was the first keyboard that I know of, at least at this form factor, that has a 0 degree angle. The 0 degree angle is actually quite nice to type on, though it takes a little bit of time to get used to. But once you do, it's actually surprisingly comfortable, and I really, really enjoy it. The general design is what some people would consider chonky. Now, I don't think it's chonky. I think it's nice and curvy. And I love the little subtle curves it has, especially here. So all the sides are nice and curved, and all of the sides are of equal height. And that equal height is about 22 millimeters. So the front height is 22 millimeters, and the side height, and the back height, and the right height, and you get the idea. Now, when properly assembled, this keyboard actually sits entirely flush. Here you can see a gap for reasons we'll get into once we get into the internals. But properly assembled, it sits very, very flush. You can obviously still see a seam, but the seam is not exaggerated like it is right now with my assembly. Here on the case back, first of all, we've got a slightly larger than average bump on. This looks like 13 millimeters or 12 millimeters, as well as this very unique weight. Now, this is why it's called the Orange 80, and also why I refer to it as the Pizza 80, because this kind of looks like a pizza. I mean, a little bit. What is very unique about this weight is each of these pieces are individually screwed in from the interior. And it was this, alongside the Singa, that gave me the inspiration for the Illuminati-shaped weight on my i1. Right here we can see there are 8 case mounting screws, and we can see they're actually pretty far in, at least on the top side. And on the bottom side, they're nearly flush with the curvature. Now the top has quite a 4-head, or a 5-head in this case. This makes space for this little badge here, but otherwise this entire area is pretty much unused in terms of the internals. I mean, I can see that Center went for a kind of real force design with a nice little 4-head, and I honestly don't mind it because realistically you're never really lacking for vertical space on your desk. Most people are dealing with horizontal space. So I don't mind a little bit of a forehead. I think it gives it a lot of character. I think it makes it look quite cute. And I think we should move directly into the internals. All right, let's open this baby up and take a look at the internals. Now I'm going to unscrew this entirely by hand, and you can tell that the screws are actually not screwed in very tightly. There's a reason for that. We'll get into that. But the disassembly procedure is actually very easy in my case, since all of these are not even finger tightened. They are barely tightened at all. Normally I would speed this bit up, but considering it is incredibly simple to open, just these 8 screws, we are good to go. The screws used here look like M3s with a little hex. Nothing too fancy. And here we go. Right off the bat, you'll notice that there is a bunch of packing tape, as well as some random pieces of plastic. And those are in there for a pretty good reason. But before we get into that, let's get into the internal assembly. So right here, we can see that there are 2 screws, and those are used to secure the case badge right here. And this case badge was fully customizable, so you could get whatever you wanted engraved, and I got pizza because I like pizza. We can see that there's a pretty big rim all the way around on the top case, and this is actually used for alignment, and is a reason why I can only hand tighten the screws and still have it perfectly aligned. Now with some keyboards, alignment is an issue, but with this one, there's actually no play between the top and bottom. They sit quite flush. There's a tiny bit of movement, but that's just manufacturing tolerances. We can see here very unique PCB element where the PCB is actually extended to bring the port to sit flush. And I wish a lot more keyboards would do this instead of recessing the port deeper. This allows you to use much wider connectors as well as much thicker connectors. Think things like Via Blue or those big RCA housings with the mini B connector. Here we can see some mysterious holes right here, and these are actually used to mount the case bottom to the top. Now traditionally we'll see these much further out, but we can see that they line in on the inner edge, which then allows the outer edge to handle the alignment of the top and bottom, and then these will just keep it from moving around. Now, I don't want to remove this tape, but we can see here the massive array of screws that are used to actually secure all of the pieces. So these 4 exterior screws that make a diamond shape actually hold the big circle. And then there is a unique screw for each of these parts, which is actually super interesting. In terms of the tolerances, it sits incredibly flush and incredibly tight. I really like that. It's a very nice looking weight, although it's not really a weight since this is aluminum on aluminum, but it looks kind of cool. And with this faux brass, which means fake brass, little design here in terms of anodization, it actually looks a lot like brass, even though it isn't. And it gives it a nice textured look that allows it to kind of look like an orange or a lemon or a pizza. All right, here on the bottom case, we can see the cutout for the USB. It is a tiny bit wider than the connector, but has very little play in it, especially compared to other keyboards that have a massive cutout for the USB connector. The PCB here, we'll go ahead and remove the plate and take a look at it, but the PCB here is very basic, no frills. This uses PS2AV, also known as Boot Mapper Client, because in 2017 QMK wasn't really being done that commonly by the Chinese community yet, or most communities. The quality of the PCB looks fine, and this PCB has been through multiple solders and desolders and still looks okay. You can see a lot of flux marks, but that's simply because I have yet to clean it. One thing to note is when I received this keyboard, there was a loose diode on one of these keys over here. I think it was the Alt key that I had to reflow, but that could have simply been caused by being jostled around during shipping and whatnot. All right, let's take a look at the plate. All right, here we are. So the plate here kind of looks like a brass plate, but it's actually just a brass anodized, well, brass color anodized piece of aluminum. So the two plates offered during the group buy was an aluminum plate and a stainless steel plate. Now, obviously, out of the two, the aluminum plate was a far better option for my preferences. Traditionally, I would have been sad that there wasn't a brass plate option, as brass tends to give more of a preferable sound profile to a lot of people on in the Western market. Though this actually sounds more than fine for a aluminum plate. I think the entire case build tied together makes this sound quite good for what it is. The plate mounting is done by very, very small little connections here. And the minimalized plate contact on the top and bottom actually helps the acoustics quite a lot in this case. In addition to that, there is no contact on the case sides. Although it seems like there is contact, there's actually quite a big gap in there. This allows for a little bit of vertical plate flex, which feels pretty good, and it also does a lot to help the acoustics, of course. Right here's the case top. We can see there's a fair bit of machining that's been put into this. First of all, we've got all of the mounting points for the plate, and as covered before, those mounting points are actually very, very subtle. There's an ever so slight overlap here where the plate actually contacts the top case, which is quite good. On my unit here, there's an accidental machining mark, which is not great, but again, for the price, not really an issue. And once the case is fully assembled, it's not really noticeable, so I never really cared about it. Other than that, it's a decently machined, decently anodized piece of aluminum with a very nice little curvature on it that I enjoy quite a bit. The plate is pretty well done. The switch cutouts are relatively tight, though not the absolute tightest I've ever seen, but they're tight enough to not be an issue. I do have some issues with the bottom row. Where the bottom row has, well, the stereotypical wide open bottom row, which can lead to some crooked switches if you're not very careful on, if you're not very careful about how you're building. In terms of the contact point alignment, center went for a perfectly symmetrical alignment, which means this hole here lines up with this hole here, and then this one nearly lines up with this one. I can see that this one would have lined up perfectly with the spacebar left stabilizer, and he decided not to put it there. That's actually a pretty good design decision. You want to distance your mounting points as far from the stabilizers as possible, though it is my preference that they're mounted outside of the stabilizer area. This allows for a little bit of flex while pressing down the spacebar. And that flex translates to a pretty big difference in terms of typing feel. I quite enjoy that. All in all, we have to keep the price. We have to keep the price into consideration. So for the actual price, I believe this plate, even a replacement plate, was like $20, and that's basically the cost to machine a plate these days with a relatively cheap manufacturer. The PCB is okay. It doesn't need anything more than what it currently has. It has full LED support, standard LED, obviously, not surface mount. And I really like the extended connector here. I think this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I wish more keyboards would do this. All right, now let's talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that I am unable to fully assemble my case because the case bottom right here actually makes contact with the switch pins. Now this can be solved permanently, assuming you know what you're doing. So what can be done is all of the protruding pins can be cut off with a pair of clippers, for example, and that will reduce their length and make it so they don't make any contact with the case bottom. I don't want to do that to these switches, as that might ruin their ability to be used in other keyboards in the future, and I prefer not to do that. So what I've gone for instead is simply layering a bunch of plastic here on the underside of the PCB, as well as some tape here. Despite doing this, if I assemble the case fully, considering how sharp and pointy a lot of these pins are, they'll actually penetrate all of the plastic and short on the bottom of the case. So as a result, I don't close it up completely. Now, a lot of people had this issue, and a lot of people were able to resolve it simply just by clipping all of the pins on their switches. Though, again, that's not something I'm really interested in, which is quite a shame, because if we remove the PCB and we just look at the case top and case bottom alone, we can see that when it's assembled properly, the seam is nearly invisible. And I think that looks incredibly good. It's actually incredibly clean in terms of the machining. All right, that is the case interior. Let's follow this up with a little bit of a sound test with some unique switches I've got in here. And we'll just make it a nice, super quick one, and then we'll just move on to our summary. So, to recap, Pizza80. Very cute, very unique TKL with a 0-degree angle and a 22mm height. Now that 22mm height leads to some issues, but all in all, it's nothing major. This board was run in summer of 2017, and the group buy was exceptionally fast. From the day that I paid till the day this arrived at my door, I believe was 27 or 28 days, which was unprecedented for boards that had not started production before payment. Of course, it has some issues, though it compensates for those issues in a lot of ways. It's incredibly unique. It's got a very nice curvy design with a little bit of a forehead that some people might enjoy and some people may not. It's rather hefty for an all aluminum keyboard at 2.222 kilos fully assembled. And I assume it would be a tiny bit heavier with the brass weights, though I believe the aluminum weight looks quite good. Now, when this arrived, I was surprised as it came with a carrying case. And to be fair, the quality of the carrying case was not spectacular. It was a little flimsy, a little rattly, but it was the first time that I had purchased a keyboard that had come with its own pre-designed case, which actually inspired me to do the same thing for all of my keyboards. In terms of the keyboard typing feel and sound, the feel, or the 0-degree angle first of all, is very difficult to get used to, though once you do it is exceptionally comfortable, especially with cherry profile keycaps. I assume it would also be comfortable with something like SA or DSA or XDA or anything that is relatively flat in order to help you adjust a little bit to the lack of angle. The design as a whole is very unique to me, and I think for the price of the keyboard, which was $280 US, it is an exceptional value. And it's a shame we're not going to see more keyboards like this, as costs of manufacturing and finishing have gone up quite a bit since 2017 and will continue to do so. But I believe this keyboard will go down in history as a very, very unique keyboard until somebody else makes a 0-degree real force like TKL at this price point, which I highly doubt. As a whole, I love this keyboard, and I don't see a lot of interest for it in the secondhand market, though it is a very interesting keyboard in my opinion. And I'm surprised that more people are not interested in at least trying out the 0-degree angle. A lot of people are willing to go to lower angles like 5 degrees or 4 degrees, but I think 0 degrees is very, very interesting. And that makes this board as a whole a very strong recommendation, although obviously you can't purchase it anymore. But I personally really like this board. It feels good, it sounds good. The machining was pretty much flawless with a little nick here and there, which for the price point was totally fine. And the finishing is, I mean, mine is silver, so it's just clear anodizing, so it's absolutely fine, which means that the quality of the aluminum underneath the 6063 is also quite good. I think overall, taking value into consideration, taking turnaround time into consideration, this would be one of my favorite keyboards of all time. And if I had to give it a numerical rating, I'd give it an easy 9 point something out of 10. And I urge you all to actually go out and find one. Find a friend that owns one and just try it out. See how you like the angle, see how you like the sound, because in general, I am a huge fan. And that's it. That's my review. If you have any questions, drop them in the description. If you hate me, let me know in the description. If you like the video, drop a like. Come back later. We'll do some more keyboard reviews. And see you on the next one. No, that fucking hat is on the wrong way. Nah. And then first ever availably or publicly available, and I fucked it up. I fucked it up. I fucked it up. Why did I fuck it up?